Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 2021 UN South Asia Forum on Business and Human Rights. This session titled The Role of Business in Promoting Fair Recruitment of Migrant Workers in South Asia in the Context of COVID-19. My name is Adarsh from Q Design, and I will be your technical facilitator today. The chat is disabled for the session, so please send any questions to the speakers to the Q&A function. Please note that the session today will be recorded. If you have any questions about Zoom or require technical assistance, please feel free to privately message me for help using the chat box. I will now hand over to Shabri to start the session.
Thank you very much, Adarsh. Can you hear me? Yep, very good. Excellent. Good morning and good afternoon for those of you from the east of Asia, and very early in the morning for Michelle and a lot of other people who are joining in from Europe and other parts to the west of the continent. What an absolute pleasure. My name is Shabri Nair. I'm the Regional Migration Specialist for the International Labour Organization in South Asia. It's an absolute honor to be hosting this particular session on the role of business in promoting the fair recruitment of migrant workers in South Asia, particularly in the context of COVID-19, which is still such a reality for all of us. As a result of COVID-19 over the last 1 year now, the 11th of March last week was the official first year anniversary since COVID-19 was declared as a pandemic. Coming from that, the learnings that we have had over the last 1 year has just been tremendous. There have been quite a few elements with regards to migrant workers that we have seen, particularly in the context of South Asia, which to a large extent is the biggest hotspot as a labor sending, migrant sending region in the world, close to 45 to 50 million migrant workers, which is about 1/3 of the global migrant worker population, which is, as per ILO global estimates of 2017, about 164 million migrant workers. We have had quite a few returnees. India alone has been one of the countries where we have witnessed a lot of returnee migrant workers. In fact, the government of India has led from the front as a country that organized through its Vande Bharat mission a massive number of returnees, and if I'm not mistaken, over 5 million in the last 1 year. A lot of these migrant workers, a lot of them are migrant workers. A lot of them are coming in the corridors from the Middle East, which is where majority of our South Asian migrant workers end up in. We've had a lot of migrant workers who are coming back without having their wages paid. We've had a lot of migrant workers who are struggling with regards to reintegration in South Asian countries, in the labor markets and social reintegration. So it's a whole range of issues that they're facing. What we would like to particularly keep in mind, however, is the link to all these issues to fair recruitment and the specific role that businesses play. The ILO has strong standards and guidelines on this matter. For instance, the ILO's Fair Recruitment Guidelines, the ILO's Fair Recruitment Initiatives. These are aspects which have played an important role for governments, employers, the workers' organizations, the trade unions, to take into consideration as they look at policies in terms of how migrant workers can be protected, specifically in the recruitment process. We have amongst us an eminent group of panelists. I will not introduce them. I will give the floor to the moderator in a second. But what is important for you to know is that this is happening in a true ILO tripartite plus format. It has representatives from the government, from the employers' organizations, from trade unions, the representative of the recruitment industry, and of course, the ILO official as well. And the moderator is Mr. William Goyce. He is the regional coordinator for Migrant Forum in Asia, perhaps one of the largest migrant rights organizations and networks in the world, and certainly the biggest in Asia, a close collaborator, confidant, and a good friend. William Goyce, I hand you the floor. Over to you.
Thank you, Shabri. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for setting the tone for a very important discussion that we must have, not only at the global level in terms of recruitment and how far we have come since ILO gave us the fair guiding principles, but also in this time of COVID. And to look at, even as we talk of building back or building forward better, to look at what this means as the vaccine is there, and as labor migration programs are picking up again, as countries of origin and destination are looking to hire or deploy migrant workers, it is important to see what we are how the guidelines, the ILO Fair guidelines or fair recruitment, is something that will configure in a world post-COVID in the recruitment scenario. And so thank you for setting the tone for that. And let's go straight. We've got very little time, actually. We've got just about an hour and 25 minutes, and we do have 4 speakers, and we will have a question answer session as well. Those who are joining us, please post your questions either in the question answer box that you have there, window that you have there, and you can post it either to any of the panelists directly, request the panelist as well to look at that section as you see yourself speaking, or even after you have spoken. Let us begin then. Let us go straight to the point. And we start with an address from the Government of India. We will have Mr. Shri Amit Shriyansh from the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, who will kick this off with a statement from the Government of India. Mr. Amit, the floor is yours.
Thank you, William. Good morning. Mr. William Goyce, moderator for this session, Ms. Michelle Layton, Chief Labor Migrant Migration Branch, ILO Headquarters, Mr. Prasad De Silva, Senior Assistant Director, General Employees Federation of Ceylon, Mr. Lakshman Besnet, General Secretary, South Asian Region Trade Union Council, Nepal, distinguished speakers, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to join this virtual discussion today on the role of businesses pertaining to fair recruitment of migrant workers in South Asia in the context of COVID-19. And I appreciate the effort of the ILO team for holding this session. The idea of safe and legal migration is at the heart of all the initiatives of the Government of India, and it is captured in our motto, Surakshit Jain, Prasikshit Jain. GOI places great emphasis on the recruitment process that is ethical, transparent, and fair. This discussion comes at an opportune time where now more than ever, we look at a collaborative effort in taking issues related to the protection of migrant workers whose vulnerabilities were exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result of the pandemic and the subsequent lockdowns and restrictions, mobility of many Indian migrant workers were forced to return home, particularly from the Gulf region. In an effort to alleviate the burden of the migrant workers, the Indian missions abroad played a key role in collating all the information of the migrant workers seeking to return home, and were pivotal in the organization of the largest repatriation mission carried out in the world. More than 1,700,000 Indians stranded in approximately 136 countries of the world have been brought back under the aegis of the Vande Bharat mission since it began in May 7th, 2020. The Government of India also launched the Swadesh portal, Skilled Workers Arrival Database for Employment Support, which aims to create a database of the repatriated migrants workers alongside their skill qualifications. The skill mapping exercise is a collaborative endeavor undertaken by the National Skills Development Corporation and the Ministry of External Affairs. Through this program, the government seeks to ensure better job prospects for the migrants and to fulfill the demand of Indian and foreign companies. Speaking specifically in terms of recruitment processes, the Ministry of External Affairs has been very active in making the recruitment environment better for businesses. The Protectorate General of Immigrants has made COVID-19 specific relaxations to aid the recruitment agencies. These relaxation measures include a 50% reduction in bank guarantees, free extension of licenses till 31st March 2021, and relaxation of office-based norms. These measures have been aimed at facilitating the ease of doing business and helping in the survival and revival of business opportunities. Further, we have recently engaged with the industry chambers and the recruitment fraternity through virtual discussions organized by the India Center for Migration, MEA's think tank for all matters relating to migration. ICM has organized numerous panel discussions pertaining to recruitment. For instance, the panel discussion on role of labor intermediaries, issues and challenges deliberated on the myriad challenges associated with the recruitment processes, such as high recruitment costs, the process of sub-agenting, continued reliance on illegal recruiting agents, and the lack of awareness among migrant workers. The discussion on recruitment costs and international migration in the context of COVID-19 involved a concurrence on the employer's pay model and took cognizance of the numerous issues confronted by migrant workers in the whole cycle of recruitment. These discussions act as a forum and a window for the Ministry of External Affairs to engage with and listen to the voices of the business fraternity. The Indian government has also signed labor mobility agreements with other countries to provide greater opportunities to people seeking to go abroad for employment. The recently signed agreement on specified skilled workers with the government of Japan is one example of the same. Further, India has also signed 20 social security agreements to allow for greater protection of Indian workers abroad. Our constant effort has been to improve the environment in which migration happens, and fair and ethical recruitment continues to be an important part of the cycle. I believe this discussion will be fruitful in exploring the key challenges that affect the implementation of ethical recruitment in the South Asian region, and will continue to contribute to knowledge development and how businesses can help in protection of an ethical recruitment process. I look forward to hearing the results of this deliberation. I thank you for your attention and once again reiterate my appreciation to the ILO team and all the speakers and the participants for organizing this insightful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for that statement, which covers very comprehensively what India has done in this time of COVID, and even prior to that in relation to addressing the issues of migrant workers. And we look forward to hearing more in the future of the development of these programs and how they continue to benefit migrant workers. Let us now move on. And sir, if you want to stay on and come back towards the end, you're more than welcome to make a comment at the end of this in the closing. I will now move on to the interactive part of our panel, of our program. And let me start straight away with Mr. Prasad De Silva. Prasad, to start off with, Prasad De Silva is the Senior Assistant Director General of the Employers Federation of Ceylon. Let me start off by saying the COVID has, at least for the recruitment industry, has been a very calm period in the sense of they all have not had much to do. Flights have been closed, borders have been closed, migrant workers' deployments have been stopped, work has been stopped in many ways. So, and we've heard very little about how this industry, how this COVID has impacted this industry. I mean, one can assume that it has had a big impact on the industry. The industry has grown over the years, kind of thing, and and it has played a key role and continued to play a key role, at least until prior to the COVID, in the deployment and hiring of migrant workers. So from your own perspective then, as you look at this, if you could very briefly kind of tell us what are the big impacts that you are looking at? That is, what are, like, if you were to enumerate like 2-3 big impacts that have hit the recruitment industry, that would be really good. The floor is yours.
Thank you, William. And good morning and good afternoon to everyone. In the interest of time, I will not be, mentioning everyone, but thank you all for giving us this opportunity to be, to join with this virtual meeting. And I represent the Employers Federation of Ceylon, which is the employer organization in the country, right? Yes, like William, the very comprehensive, like William said, very comprehensive introduction by the government of India is, it was wonderful, and it was very nice to see that the Indian government has done so much for the people, and I believe Sri Lankan government is doing its part. And having said that, Sri Lanka, like the issues faced by everyone in the region is the same. Mr. Srishant, concise them all. So I believe the migrant workers are a very important part of the economy of Sri Lanka, and this has been a huge hit. Uh, so as the employee organization, we actually look at the, recruitment aspect and also reintegration aspect. Uh, the Employees Federation of Ceylon, with the assistance of the ILO, with the guidance of the ILO, introduced the skill recognition. We were very much involved in that, and we introduced this skill passport, where people, when they go, they are recruited on the skills that they possess, and it is very easy then that avoids unnecessary payments such as the recruitment fees, etc., which is a huge concern. And when they go and acquire skills, it is very easy for the employers in this part of the world, in their own country, to reintegrate them, because they know what the skills that these people have acquired. So it was successfully launched, and due to this COVID pandemic, it had been rather slow, but the launching itself was a great achievement, and we are looking forward to strengthen that. And we have a network of employers who are willing to recruit these returnees depending on their skills. But unfortunately, these employers themselves are having a difficult time. They are going through a tough time because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the recruitment in that sense, is a bit of a, slow happening at the moment. But I believe the things will be improved soon, and we will be more than happy to do our part of the, program, assisting the recognition of skills when recruiting them, and also in reintegrating. And I believe uh, the bilateral agreements will be a good idea when it comes to skill recognition. And if the countries can, with the help of the International Organization of Migration, can get into contracts of recognizing skills and mutually respecting those, I think that's going to be a good idea. William, I would like to suggest at this forum, IOM can have, closely look at this and see how this recruitment and skill recognition can be done through agreements between countries and things like that.
Thank you. Thank you, Prasad, for
yeah,
opening up this conversation. And I like that you started by pointing out at skills. And I can see, and I've seen this even this is prior to the COVID actually, skills was becoming the new kind of mantra with regard to migration. My question to you is then, as you see skills, and you have pointed it out correctly yourself, that countries would, across the borders, would have to recognize skills. So Sri Lankan skills would have to recognized in a country of destination. The challenge lies, I guess, somewhere is that if there is no skills recognition across the board in terms of mutually recognized skills, you would have the same problem with somebody coming from Nepal, skills recognized, different competency, so the Philippines different, India different, Bangladesh different, all coming in into corridors with a certain skill set, but who recognizes overall, and how do you come to that point? Is it the ILO? Is it some other institution? There is no global institution that says, okay, this skill is certified across corridors, across boards. So I'm wondering if skills really, if this is going to be the way to move forward, and particularly post-COVID, I know there will be a lot of emphasis on skills, but we will also have the challenge of deployment from countries of origin. As you know, people want to get employment and things like that. There's going to be this huge wave of people who are unemployed, who were stranded, who had lost their jobs, come back, who will be looking for to going out, or who were already set to go out. So what do you say about that in terms of post-COVID, and how long will that skill argument hold post-COVID?
You raised a very important point, William. Thank you very much. And I believe there has to be mutual understanding on this. Maybe South Asia Forum of Employers, assisted by the ILO and the IOM, will be a great platform for all of us to start. I do agree that these skills have to be identified by member countries. I mean, countries, say someone coming from Nepal will have to be identified for his skills in Sri Lanka, and the Sri Lankan skills will have to be identified by the Gulf Corridor countries. So there has to be mutual understanding, and I believe IOM can hopefully, look into this and facilitate this kind of recognition in a much wider perspective, and maybe start with countries agreeing, bilateral agreements or whatever, and that will be a way to start. But the end result should be that it has to be universally accepted, acceptable and mutually recognizable by all. That should be the final achievement of this.
Okay, thank you for that. And I do hope, and I like this idea, the South Asia Forum of Employees. I'm wondering across the Asia region, or across countries of Asia or region within the Asia region, if there is that possibility of coming to some kind of mutual understanding and recognition of skills. I definitely think this thing needs to be fast-tracked. Lest coming out of COVID, the pressures that we will have, countries of origin and deployment and seeking work overseas, those pressures might put not fit in well with the skills kind of argument if we don't quickly move towards this kind of recognition, mutual recognition of skills. So thank you for pointing that out. Let me come back, move on to our next speaker, and that is our next panelist, and that is Lakshman Basnet. Lakshman Basnet is the General Secretary of the South Asian Regional Trade Union Council, SATUC. And Lakshman, you have for a long time taken up the issues of migrant workers, and you have gone to different fora trying to address some of the major concerns. In this time of COVID, you have seen hundreds return to your own country, thousands return to your own country. And one of the key things, insights that you have shared in other panels is many of those returning had issues with the recruitment process. Can you say something about that? Lakshman, your mic, please.
Thank you, William, very much for your question. Thanks to ILO and all the participants from, especially from Government of India, which we have a very little opportunity to interact with, but we welcome the participation of Government of India. And I think recruitment is the basic key part of this whole migration process. For me, for a fair recruitment will keep the national economy flourishing, as well as the individual migrant workers getting a good deal. The reason I'm saying is when they go here from Nepal or in any South Asian country, they are very hesitant to speak about what kind of treatment they are getting from the employers because of the fear of eventualities, what may happen to them in the country of destination. So they think that if we keep on paying good amount of money under the table of deal, we get a better services there, a better job, better paying. So this is a very important question for us that they should not be paying anything to the employer or the recruiter. And sometimes we don't know who is the employer or who is the recruiter. And the kind of contract they get, standard contract, which is by the recruiter, they don't know. Those who are migrant workers, they don't know what kind of contract they are getting. But once they realize, they only realize when they reach the country of destination and they say that, okay, this contract is not valid here. You have to do what we have to say. But so what we are asking the international organizations or the employers that we have to have a standard basic contract, which should be acceptable by everyone and which should be in favor of workers that whatever is written there, they should get it. Those who came back now, they are telling the stories that what kind of wage was not paid to them in that country of destination. Hurriedly, they were sent back without any kind of remuneration, back wages, or end of services, or tickets, and all those things. Some of them had to come back to their respective country by asking money from their home country. And it's a very disturbing that some of them have to go into the loan debts and bankruptcies. And the news in Nepal, especially I'm talking about Nepal and some of the South Asian countries, that they have to pawn their last wealth, that is a small house or whatever they have, to the we call it meter interest, like a taximeter. It runs by minute. So by the end of the term, the whole house is gone for a small amount of money. It's all because of the recruitment, unscrupulous recruitment policies. And government thinks that they are making it very strict by putting a lot of deposits and a lot of penalties and all those things. But that will not work. We need to have understanding between the workers, the government, and the recruiters, that what kind of recruitment policy should we have. And of course, Nepal is not alone. We have to have a regional understanding, especially South Asian regional, because the whole process is the same. In India, Nepal, Bangladesh, like Mr. Prasadi said, and Sri Lanka, there's no different, or even Pakistan or Afghanistan, those who go into the contract labor, it's the same. So we have to come to an understanding. The South Asian bloc should negotiate with the GCC bloc that, okay, these are the basic understanding on recruitment and the social protection and how do they work together in country of destination, and what do they get back when they come back. So there is no complaint, fair migration, welfare of the workers. This is what we want, that there should be understanding. Otherwise, one more minute, I will take one more minute, that the employer in the other end is bargaining with the countries. Okay, Bangladesh is supplying labor on cheaper rate. What about you? When we come down to the price and they say, okay, Nepal is coming down to the price. So what is your, they will go to the third country and say, what is your third? So this is a spiral going down, down, down. So we have to stop it. This is the only moment where we have a chance to alleviate poverty. And once we have a fair recruitment policy, the skills and the pre-departure, preconception, everything will flourish. This is my first step is recruitment. That will also decide what kind of treatment I'm going to get in the country of destination. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Lakshman. And I think you have said some very important things that need further deliberation upon. You have said, of course, what the migrant worker can expect in terms of protections and standards and security in a country of destination depends very much on his recruitment or her recruitment, which is the first step in her migratory journey. What you have further said and you have highlighted that a lot of what goes wrong with recruitment, now you are beginning to see with all the hundreds and thousands of migrant workers who have returned because of the COVID. Suddenly, what has gone wrong with recruitment is staring you in the face. This is something I see in the question answer box as well. Shom Lutil from People's Forum has put that. He has largely put a question saying that Nepal seems to have good policies, no recruitment fees, employer pay model and things like that, but there is huge issues in implementation, and he is looking for answers as well as to what should we be doing. And can I ask you then, how much more can the recruitment process be made more transparent and accountable? Is some of the experiments as online going online? I think India has this e-migrate kind of thing, the Abu Dhabi dialogue. They are talking now of going transparent on this recruitment processes going online. Musanid scheme in Saudi Arabia and things like that, taking the contracts online for transparency and accountability. Would that help? Would that be a way of addressing some of the issues that you are talking about?
Yes, that may help for very elite migrant workers, very elite, those who are going in a higher job. But 95% of the migrant workers are going on a very low skilled. They don't know. They don't know where they are going. I mean, they don't find any difference between Qatar and UAE or Kuwait. And even I have, when I was traveling to Qatar and onwards, they say, okay, brother, see my pass, air boarding pass. Where do I go? So I say, this is Poland. You are going to Poland. So he was surprised. He did not know. Even in the e-migration, I have heard this for the last 4 or 5 years in Abu Dhabi dialogue and other dialogue. But how are they going to fill out those forms? The recruiter has to be involved in that. Somehow or other, they will be involved in that. And again, the same process will go. So the only process is you have to have the courage, give the courage to the migrant worker that if you pay anything extra here, you can speak out and nothing will happen there. Until and unless that kind of process we evolve, the recruiters will not speak, and the workers will say, okay, heck with it, I'll pay 150,000 and go and get lots and lots of money. But that is not the reality. That is not the reality. The reality is they might turn back into the boxes. So you have to tell them that going to abroad is not the answer for your life. It is only a small process. And for that, you have to go through all these processes and find a right recruiters, which is certified by the government of Nepal. But in the villages, the agent, he doesn't know who he is working for. And he will take him to whoever is the biggest bidder for the AZ. So that kind of situation has to be eliminated. So it's a, sort of a whole process. Until and unless we have a standard contract which stipulates everything, that okay, you will be not paid for you are not going to pay anything, because this your trip is paid by such and such company, that's where you are going. Once they reach there, they have to have the courage that okay, the sir, your letter of appointment tells me that I should not pay, but my recruiter, this person, did not allow me to board the plane unless I paid him this kind of money. He has to have the courage. We have to have the confidence in the nation. We have to have the confidence in the civil society. We have to have the confidence in the trade unions that they will take up this situation and go to the concerned sort of a mechanism. We have to create an international mechanism. South Asia was trying to make a until the SARC went into the hibernation, there was a beautiful agenda passed. So there was a mechanism for skill testing, for recruitment, and all those. And we have to have this governance very close to our heart in the village. Okay, I get cheated by the recruiter or the employer there, but I live in far away, and my whatever the amount I am cheated, it will take me money to come back and forth into the center, and I don't want to come back. I don't. I'm alive. That is fine. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you again, Lakshman. I will ask you to ponder upon a question, and everybody in this forum who has been listening to Lakshman as well, to ponder upon this question. The previous speaker emphasized on skills. We all know that skill is also going to be a big part of future mobility kind of thing. So Lakshman, when you speak very much for the workers who, let's say, fall within the low wage, low
Yes.
skill kind of category. I'm wondering, as we talk of more and more of skills and skills for deployment, do you think the low skill will no longer be deployed abroad? Or do you think there is still a market for the low skill, low wage workers kind of thing? I want you to think about this, because more and more as we talk about skills, there is an assumption that everybody's skills will be lifted to the point that even the argument that you are making, that they cannot fill up a form and all, that they will be able to fill up. They might be still doing work in the kind of low skill job, but they have enough skill to fill up these forms and things like that. So just think, is the market shrinking for low skill, low wage workers in a discourse on skills and skills upgrade? I'll come back to you on that. Let me go to Amit Saxena, who is from Ambe International. And Amit, apparently yours is one of the biggest recruitment agencies industry in India. So let me ask you the same question I asked Prasad. I mean, this has been like a vacation time for you, not a long vacation. It's almost a staycation, a new word that is come in concept today. But listening to what we just heard from Lakshman, that the whole issue about recruitment in a certain sense going wrong for so many workers, and becoming aware of that now as thousands are returning. The whole ILO principle on no fees, that it's the employer pay model kind of thing. Do you think moving into a post-COVID world, as the industry picks up, as countries of origin start wanting to deploy, as workers want to go forward, is this going to be one of the fundamentals of a new recruitment reform program within South Asia?
That's a great question, William. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Loud and clear.
Superb, superb. So firstly, thank you to the ILO team, Shabri, yourself, for inviting me. It's a very informative session. I've heard my colleagues before this speak, very interesting perspectives. And thank you for letting me offer my perspective on this as well. Before I directly address the employer pay model, William, I would like to just point out the industry that I represent. It's the licensed recruiters and HRA community. We're 1,000+ in India. we've recruited over 35 million Indians to different parts of the world. And as an industry, we've existed for almost 40 years. And this industry has had less than 0.1% grievances registered against them from immigrants going abroad. The kind of issues that Mr. Lakshman, my previous panelist, mentioned, they're very true. But against the licensed recruiters community, the number of complaints is only 0.1%. And this is born out of official e-migrate data. And I just wanted to set this in context, that when we talk about widespread issues and, workers paying high fees and exploitation and accountability, in India, our immigration laws are fairly mature. Our previous version of the Immigration Act was 1983. We have had more than 100 clarifications issued after that. There is a new progressive, very progressive immigration bill that was tabled in Parliament last year, and we're hoping it'll pass sometime this year. India has the largest diaspora in the world. Sure, there are issues, but those issues, if you set it in context of the millions of Indians living abroad, is very small. And we often confuse, some of those individual issues, and they get highlighted in media, and we confuse that against the positive experience of 99.99% of the Indian diaspora that has gone through the legal recruitment community, which is what I represent. With that little bit of background, and sorry for going off track on that, your specific question. See, the employer paid model, I did a informal survey before this session today with some of my co-recruiters. I'm also part of a fairly large association of recruiters in India. I'm the secretary of an association which has 400 recruiters operating under it. 60 to 70% of the recruitment that we do to Middle East and Europe is already employer paid. So this is reality already, right? This is not something, which is theoretical. There are employers who, operate in high margin businesses like oil and gas, like retail, which can already afford the employer paid model. Now, when we talk about the industries that don't operate in an employer paid model, usually these are low margin, low profit industries like construction, hospitality, where there are a large number of people required. Now we must understand, although I'm a recruiter, we're based out of India and we help recruit thousands of people to the Middle East and Europe every year. The companies that operate there, they operate in a competitive marketplace, right? They pray at the altar of profits. So unless the standards are unified, right, as my previous panelist, Mr. Lakshman mentioned, there will always be industry companies that will find different ways of doing things and causing companies that may follow higher standards to lose out. So, if there is even one company in the market that bids for a tender, which is using employee paid recruitment, the tender rates that they're filling out will be lesser than other companies and they will win the tender, right? And that doesn't work in anyone's favor. And this is what has been happening in the Middle East for, since the last 40 years that, we have been tracking this. Another small point over here is that when we say employer paid model, we normally mean the cost of recruitment, which is actually a small portion. There is a cost of migration, right, which is actually the larger component, which is the documentation, the attestation, the medical, the police clearance, the insurance, the visa stamping, the air tickets. These are genuine costs which are being incurred by employers because of compliances, because of laws, because of regulations which have been set in the destination countries. So the entire visa system is predicated on a fixed length of stay, right? In the Middle East, you will be recruited on a 1-year contract, 2 years contract. So the visa is valid for 2 years. But, let's say there's a worker who gets recruited and, has a genuine issue or not a genuine issue, right? Whatever the case may be, but wants to return within 2 months. The company is not going to get back the 18 months of visa sponsorship that they've paid to the government, right? This is an issue that needs to be addressed at the destination side, not the source side, because we have no control over there. And this has been going on for years. The last piece that I do want to mention over here is that, the singular focus on just ethical recruitment practices then ignores the realities of other HR policies, right? Which is higher pay, better working conditions, better living conditions, right? And you may make recruitment more ethical by making it an employer-paid model, but in a competitive marketplace, if you haven't addressed the root issues, right, it'll come out in some other pressure point. So it can lead to lower salaries. It can lead to employment for shorter duration. We know that the gig economy is a reality because employers want to avoid the costs of full-time employment and onerous labor laws, right? And I don't think these are desired outcomes of this group either. It's when we talk about protection, it cannot be protection only for recruitment policies. It has to be protection of the worker for the length of time that they say. So those are my little bits on this conversation, William, and thank you for having me so that I could make these points.
No, great, and thank you for making those points, which also is something that we have been looking at for years as well, that it is that the recruitment industry has grown so big that there is licensing and there are licensed recruiters and things like that, but there are also unscrupulous actors within the market, both in countries of origin and destination, that prey on migrant workers, and that is why you have this whole kind of issues with regard to recruitment. But looking at your own and how you have deployed. And you've raised, of course, a very good point saying that it cannot only be recruitment. We need to look at the whole thing, the whole, competitive market and the conditions at work and the benefits at work and things like that, salaries and things like that. But that is where as an industry then, how do you ensure that the standards, and we will have Michelle in a little while on the panel, how do you ensure that your network that is there is keeping to some kind of standard and struggle? We've just heard now for breaking news. Everybody's waiting to see once the US stock market opens today, whether Uber is going to have a crash in stocks because of the UK decision on Uber. And now the UK decision is Uber drivers have all labor rights, including vacation and pension kind of thing. So it does take front runners. It does take people that are doing the right thing to stand up and be counted in this kind of discussion. So how do you ensure that within your network that standards, ILO standards are complied by, IOM guidelines are complied by? How do you ensure that?
So in our industry, we do have a code of ethics, but three broad guiding principles which I would like to share with this group. One is following all the rules and guidelines set up under the Indian Immigration Act of 1983. We follow that in letter and spirit. Second is accurate sharing and recording of information between employers and job seekers. This is absolutely necessary, and we don't brook any exceptions to this rule. And the last is upholding the employment contract, right, signed between the employer and the employee, to the letter and the spirit of that contract. And issues start when you try and settle that contract in favor of one party over the other, when it's not in consonance with that contract. So for us, these three guiding principles are, things we have followed. And this is the reason this industry has existed for 40 years, William. I would like to go back to the fact that this industry has 99.99% of the people they've recruited have had brilliant experiences. They've built lives, they've come back, they've built houses, got their children educated. These businesses which are operating in the recruitment marketplace, they're 40-year-old companies, which is sustainable, right? They're doing good work, which is why they're still in existence, which is why candidates are coming back to them and employers are coming back to them. But these are the three main principles that I can offer immediately, William.
Thank you. I'll ask you to ponder on a question even as I move on to the next panelist. And that is a question that Meru and Parvati have put in the question answer box. And it is a fact, and we heard about the Vande Bharat mission, in which thousands have returned from countries of destination. I'm wondering if your industry has looked at and what measures or mechanisms the industry has put in place to address some of these concerns of these workers who have not been paid wages, who have not received end of service benefits. What kind of humanitarian support has been extended to those workers that went under the industry that you oversee, all the partners with? And I'll ask you to come back to me on that and in terms of answering the question of Meru and Parvati. But let me move on to the next panelist, and that is Michelle Layton. And Michelle Layton is well known to many of us. She is the chief of the labor migration branch at the ILO headquarters, and she's been very active in our region as well, most recently in the Abu Dhabi dialogue, and in the GFMD, putting together the whole labor migration scenario and some of the challenges therein. Michelle, let me ask you then, so much has been said already with regard to the standards within the market and things like that. And we do have the ILO Fair guiding principles that are there for recruitment. Despite that being out there, despite the advocacy for it, despite the capacity building and the technical support that has been given, what are some of the gaps you see? What's not happening? You know, Lakshman pointed that out, and suddenly we are all facing at what was wrong as workers come back in this time of COVID in the thousands, and we realize how messed up that system was. So now, as the ILO and as you all do your own, research on what happened in this time of COVID with regard to migrant workers, what's not happening in your view? How do we advance this further?
Well, thank you so much, William. And let me also thank the Undersecretary and Prasad, Lakshman, and Amit for their insights earlier. And Amit mentioned 3 principles that they urge their members to follow. I hope he will consider also including the fair recruitment general principles and operational guidelines that you just mentioned in advocacy for his members too. But let me just start by saying that I think this discussion shows that employers and businesses, including the recruitment industry, as well as workers' organizations, have a critical role to play to ensure the smooth functioning of labor markets. And a core aspect of this is the systems in place for recruitment of workers. And it's also clear that the pandemic is having a brutal impact on economies and societies with serious business disruptions. I think it was already stated that the recruitment industry faces both the complexities and the rising costs in meeting clients' demands and also in filling essential jobs. We know too, and I think Lakshman pointed this out, that migrant workers are experiencing significant impacts, not just job losses, but many forced to return to fragile labor markets. But there are also tens of thousands that, with border closures, left them without jobs, high debt burdens due to labor brokers. For example, 115,000 people we know received work permits to migrate from Nepal, but were not able to. And in Pakistan, it was about 60,000 who'd registered who were unable to move. Now, as borders ease, they may be forced to pay even higher fees and compete for scarcer jobs, or some may be forced to take irregular pathways. And ILO's assessments on the impact of Asian migrant workers show that low-skilled workers who remain in destination countries often have had their contracts renegotiated during this pandemic with lower pay, may not have been paid at all. Lakshman pointed that out. They face continuing harsh and unhealthy conditions. They lack social protection. And those in agriculture and domestic work are often not protected by labor laws. So it's really encouraging to hear and to follow the transformation in the recruitment processes and industry. And some of those transformations have been profound. While currently we know that many are trying to follow the COVID-19 safety precautions. But as you mentioned, William, there are many challenges that remain. Migrants are still required to pay fees and costs for their jobs, and these are against international labor standards. And not all countries prohibit this. So the risks are certainly increasing. We've helped many South Asian governments conduct surveys on just how much recruitment fees and costs are paid by workers. Most recently, some of the data show, disturbingly, that they're paying, in some cases, almost 17 and a half months for their salary for a job. And this is what they were paying before COVID. We assume that these fees are going to rise because recruitment is becoming more complex, it's becoming more expensive, not only for workers, but for the recruiters in business. And these may be due to additional procedures, health screenings, quarantine, and so on. Now, as has been pointed out, many countries in South Asia have implemented extensive regulations to govern recruitment, but not all of them are comprehensive. And I think some of the chat box notes indicate not fully implemented. And some of this is due to structural factors that make the recruitment industry really difficult and challenging to regulate. There are many sub-agents who are not covered by regulation, and yet they often serve as the main point of contact for migrant workers at the grassroots level, and they're identified with higher migration costs. Countries of origin, many in South Asia, are also coping with large numbers of returning migrants. We know, as we heard the Undersecretary, millions have been repatriated. But we also see that cooperation across migration corridors is simply not as strong as is needed to prevent the human and labor rights violations, including fee charging. And it really takes cooperation across migration corridors to ensure that fair recruitment becomes a reality. So yes, there are increasing gaps that remain of concern. William, thank you.
Michelle, thank you. Thank you so much for pointing that out, some of the gaps. And I'm looking at what you have said. 17.5 months of salary workers have to pay just to get a job. And you have rightly pointed out that these costs are going to increase post-COVID. Looking at the question answers there, I see a question also from Akil, which says that the minimum referral wage of Indian workers is now being decreased. There was a minimum referral wage for Indian workers, and now there is a move to decrease that in the new recruitment cycle, which means this is going to lead to competition within the South Asia region for sure. Because in the South Asia region, let us assume that Indian workers were the highest paid workers. Now, if they decrease, then of course it's a sliding scale. This was the story before the COVID. Definitely it will be the story after the COVID. So what would be some of the suggestions as the ILO that you think that we need to look at in terms of South Asia and the regional processes or global processes and things like that? What can we use to see how to put things right, and what are some of the mechanisms within South Asia that you think would be helpful?
Yes, and indeed, thanks, William, for that question. I think the pandemic has given us quite a lot of lessons, and certainly pause to rethink with governments the avenues for improving how international migration is governed and the recruitment systems that we want to see as we move forward. Systems which are fair, more equitable, rights-based, and certainly more responsive to meeting real labor market needs. And to do this, I think we're going to need to do a better job of linking up our migration policies to employment policies. These are often detached. A better job is needed also in engaging business and workers' organizations in active labor market policies so we can have a dialogue and really adopt the kinds of policies that are going to make a difference. Now, the South Asian Forum of Employers in 2019 in its Delhi resolution encouraged member firms to apply decent work standards, and those included fair recruitment systems, banning forced labor, providing written labor contracts, as Lakshman pointed out, and giving equal protection to workers. These are principles reaffirmed by the ILO's Fair Recruitment Guidelines. And we're implementing a global action program now in Pakistan and Sri Lanka and other countries as well. And some of these activities are including, for example, support to the ILO's Global Business Network on Forced Labor to develop what is a due diligence toolkit for small and medium enterprises. And I know that other colleagues have mentioned the impact of small and medium enterprises, but this toolkit can help to better understand the risks during the migrant workers' journey, and also how best to engage recruitment agencies in this process. And the toolkit was adapted to specific country contexts in South Asia that can help employers familiarize themselves with different corridors' specific risks and what the local legislation calls for, as well as international standards. So ILO is supporting governments in South Asia to create what we would call fair migration, fair recruitment corridors. And one example is between Nepal and Jordan, where we have provided technical support in the drafting of bilateral labor migration agreement there. And the Nepal-Jordan bilateral agreement provides for fair recruitment for women migrant workers from Nepal going into Jordan's garment industry. Now, this is one pilot and one example of how we can make this work, but it needs to be broader across many other countries. And policy frameworks at the national level can play a role. They have a very important role to play in modernizing their recruitment systems in line with international labor standards, and ones that would allow the public and private employment agencies to play their full role. Here, I think also technology, the e-recruitment system was mentioned, but technology is becoming more important, and we do need to create platforms to share lessons. One of the examples that I can point out is the workers' organizations, which play a role in ensuring effective protection of migrant workers. The International Trade Union Confederation has developed new technology to facilitate workers' access to information and redress mechanisms under this technology called the Migrant Recruitment Advisor, and we're very much supporting that. I can name a few other areas, but under a new phase of our Fair Recruitment Initiative that's being launched at the end of this month, we'll also be creating a knowledge hub that allows policymakers to come together and really take up the lessons we've learned in the last 6 or 7 years of this work directly in South Asia and other regions. So they'll be able to exchange good practices, look at the lessons we're gaining from the operation of the Fair Recruitment Initiative, which now is in 30 countries, and the experiences of businesses and workers' organizations. But why don't I stop there, William? Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks again, Michelle. And I'll ask you to ponder on this question as we go to the question answer session as well. Is that a number of the previous speakers also spoke about the destination country. And I like what you have said in terms of helping countries of origin with toolkits for fair recruitment corridors and things like that. The big challenge, and we heard even Amit say that, is the policies at the country of destination. And it's market driven, it's competitive, it's low cost and things like that. How can the ILO or the UN agencies that are today involved in migration bring a more rights-based approach from the country to the countries of origin, and not this kind of market dynamic which plays out in countries of, when I'm saying it's market dynamic, I'm basically saying neoliberal cutthroat market dynamic, the cheap cost of labor and things like that. How can the ILO, UN agencies in this new climate of the global compact, I know there's a working group on bilateral agreements. So how can that be brought forward to bear to say enough of that old system, the power dynamics between country of origin and destination would lead to problems like this. But can there be more sense of interdependence? That you need this labor and this labor has rights and dignity as human beings. How can we move that discussion? But let me go back again to the panel and let me look at the question answers. To folks in the room, I see questions there and I will ask the questions as I see them. Let me start going back once again to Prasad then. Prasad, there are some questions there in terms of if you might want to answer, if you've seen them. But let me put this question to you that I put to Amit to look at as well. In relation to Sri Lankan workers who came back from destination countries in this time of COVID, who were repatriated, what was the Employers Federation able to do for them in terms of support, humanitarian or rights-based in terms of access to unpaid wages or end of service benefits and things like that? Were there any measures taken by the Employers Federation?
Well, William, it's this, the Employers Federation of Ceylon has affiliated, chambers all over the country, from the northeast to the south and, the length and breadth of the country. And what we can do is, what we do is to, direct these people. I mean, they are from all over the country, and they are not essentially from the capital itself, where we are housed. So what we do is, through our collaboration, when there is a requirement for people to be recruited, we guide them to the prospective employers. That is the role that we are planning to play. But unfortunately, during this pandemic, even those people who could have possibly employed them are affected. Now that's a serious issue. Okay? So these employers are also interested in going on for retrenchments and things like that. So I do not think we have. I mean, I cannot honestly say that we have played a huge role there. But then, I mean, this is something that we have to be very closely looking at, because when the employers themselves are going through difficult and tough times, the recruitment is not happening the way it should be. So all we can do is to create these awareness and create the links. So that is what we have been doing. We have been affiliating with our affiliated associations and trying to direct them. But the returning migrants, they have to first show us their intention to be employed and all that. There have been not many who have done that. So that's a area that we have to look at.
Thank you, Prasad. I agree that this is something that we will have to look at. I definitely think countries of origin, this is a time for reckoning in the terms of, like you said earlier, as the skills discussion becomes bigger, there will be lesser deployment of people who don't have the skills, but then there will also be the challenge of integrating those who are returning. So these are tough times, and it would be good to see how the Employers Association is able to come up with answers and solutions in countries of origin. But let me come back to you if there are any other questions that will be posted. Let me come to you, Amit. There seems to be some question there by some of these two colleagues in the question box. This thing of the reduction in the referral wage that India is proposing in deployment. What are your thoughts on this? The question is that these were already set at a minimum, and now to go below that minimum would be devastating. Your thoughts?
So this is a controversial question, actually, but I'll try and answer it as best as I can. See, one is trying to implement minimum referral wages in country of origin, in any case, has no legal standing in the country of destination. I think this is clearly understood, and it has led to rampant use of contract duplication, right? I'm calling it out on this discussion. And it exists because you're trying to implement laws in one country in another country, right? I don't understand how that works in any case. We've said this at several forums. Unless there are minimum wages in the Middle East, in the Gulf, in Europe, whatever MRW we are setting in India should follow that. That is the correct and legal way to do this, so that businesses can operate in a system of transparency and professionalism. Otherwise, it just digs the problem underground, right? And that's what the MRW had done all these years, at least for my structured recruitment industry. The second is, the question was more contextual, asking if lowering the MRW will make it more attractive for people to recruit Indian workers. There are published studies which show that the share of Indian workforce in the recruitment market in the GCC has reduced by half between 2011 to 2020. So in that sense, the bottom of the pyramid jobs, Indian workers were already getting priced out, right? And I do believe that migration exists because of a lack of opportunity or because of salary arbitrage. And if that exists, then should you be denying opportunities to people because you want them to get higher wages in a competitive market that exists in the destination countries? That's the only last thing I would like to say on that topic. Thanks, William.
No, thank you, Amit. And I'll ask you, I see Ellen Sana is on this call as well. So, and that would be good to hear her thoughts on this. But I know that the Philippines had kind of started this spiral in some ways of minimum wage for its workers many years ago by saying at least $400 was the minimum that needed to. There is some success. We it's always a question as to how successful this has been. But I agree with you, and this might be good for us to look at also is countries of destination and the ILO. There is a convention of the ILO on minimum wage convention, and we are there's some new groundbreaking kind of news as well in terms of Qatar in the Gulf region announcing a minimum wage as well for the first time. So this might be something to look at as well, but related to recruitment, related to what Prasad was talking, and Amit, what you are saying about the whole migration kind of in the workplace. Is this something also that we need to move towards kind of thing, and rather than falling into this trap of a slight, a descending scale in terms of wages. But let me then, that's why I ask you is the same question that I put earlier to you, if you could answer. With the turning to the returnees who have returned, was the industry able to look at how many were returning who had not been paid end of service benefits, wages, or whatever, and come up with some kind of mechanism or protocol or program to address that?
Sure. So in terms of people who are returning, again, the e-migrate system has a very mature and very robust system of complaints that can be raised. And as recruiters, we have to address each and every one of those grievances. Otherwise, there are outcomes for us in terms of our e-migrate processing. I know for a fact that there are a lot of recruiters who have taken care of the repatriation of workers, have paid for Vande Bharat flights, have organized exclusive Vande Bharat flights when they were not available, have repatriated them through third countries, right? Unfortunately, there have been deaths that have taken place where we have coordinated as an industry with the Indian missions abroad and tried to facilitate that as well. And, I would like to make a more positive statement over here is we're looking more at restarting rather than the problems that have taken place. I'm happy to note that in the last 6 months, we have already recruited 30,000 Indians back to the Middle East from Mumbai alone, right? The best way to solve these problems is, of course, if they've been denied something that needs to be addressed, but if you can get them back to the Middle East, back to Europe in gainful employment, that's the most positive thing that we can do. And that's what we're focused on. If flights open up and visa quarantine regulations are relaxed, my industry is sitting on very large demand, and we can get a lot of these folks back to gainful employment very soon. We're actually waiting for things to open up so that mobility of people is relaxed quicker. I think if the team here, if ILO can help facilitate that in terms of information dissemination and easing up some of the rules and procedures around quarantine, visa, returning to work, that may be the most positive thing we could do to impact people's lives right now.
No, thank you for that, Amit, and I like the idea of, and we've heard this before as well, of building forward. And what you are saying is increase options for mobility of people. But I will emphasize. You can see already my screen is that says justice for wage theft. It is largely because we also believe that as we look forward, we have to deal with a reckoning of the past. We have got on record thousands of migrant workers who have returned and not been paid wages and end of service benefits, and some accountability of that has to. Otherwise, the scar and the legacy of that will continue to haunt many of us, including migrant workers, for years, and the migration program itself for years to come. So it might be good to think of how this can be addressed. Let me come to, I will ask one more question before I move actually. Amit, how often does your kind of industry sit with the trade unions and civil society organizations that work on or look at migration in the country? Is there forums like regular forums for dialogue, debate, discussion?
Uh, we have a very powerful interaction mechanisms with the government of India. That's something we do. We do meet with ILO Shabri and his team quite often. He's helped us organize a really useful session with members of civil society as well. But I'm not aware if there is a regular sort of interaction taking place, William.
Okay. I was thinking that might be one of the lessons coming out of COVID. We do have in the Philippines, and Ellen, since you're on the call, if you can type that out, we do have in the Philippines a regular meeting of government and other stakeholders, trade union, civil society, and looking at the issues of migrant workers. And this is done on a regular basis kind of thing with the government kind of thing to look at how better to address migrant worker issues. But that might be something to do within the South Asia region. I don't see any country in South Asia having such regular forums. And if it has started with Shabri and his team there, it might be something good to see how this could be made a regular feature. Let me come to you then, Lakshman. As you see this thing of recruitment and you are familiar, and there is a question there that I will ask you, because there is a question there with regard to both ILO and IOM. So you as a trade unionist, of course, constituency of the ILO, look at the fair guiding principles and things like that, but you also know that IOM is involved and looking at ethical recruitment, and there is this whole thing of this principle-based approach that recruiters need to take on. There's going to be a monitoring of it and things like that. So how do you see engagement in the region moving forward along this kind of, since there is so much available by way of information, how can we take this information to the ground of these UN agencies and the work that they have been able to put into these guiding principles, frameworks, and things like that? How can this be translated on the ground? Your mic, please.
We have an agreement last year with the SAFE South Asian Federation of Employers in South Asia to work on migration. And for me, I'm especially working with recruiters in Nepal. Though my affiliates are working under the umbrella of SARTUC, and the whole purpose is to have a dialogue constantly with the recruiters and come up with the ideas how to make it the fair and ethical recruitment. Employers or recruiters have constantly told us that they are happy with very small benefit, whatever is legally prescribed or legally acknowledged by all. They are happy with that. But rest of the money we pay through for visa and other processes, which takes a longer part of the whole money. So we don't disagree with that. There's a visa process, medical, and there's a lot of misconception going on about the medical processes, all those things. That's okay. But our process is, we as a trade union and the employers federations of SAFE, which is called SAFE, and the government has to come too, have a GCM implementation platform, which will look into all the aspects of that. That's where the local government is also involved, where they will keep the aggregated data of the migrant workers, and where the grievances can be held, so that it will be easier for migrant workers so not to come to the center of capital and ask for whatever their grievances is. So we are trying to create an atmosphere where we come, and this has been agreed already, and we are just waiting for some openness. So we have already started open discussions. So we had it just a few days ago, and recruiters sat all throughout the whole time, and they said, Lakshman, whatever you say, we are ready. But I mean, we are ready to work with you, but the government has to listen to us also. That there's a 7 crores of rupees as a guarantee, or it's a huge amount of money. We cannot pay that kind of amount. We have to make our living too. So you recruiters and trade unions and the government has to come with a platform where individual or group grievances can be handled and make it a law. Make it a law and work through it. Otherwise, I mean, we have about a huge amount of work, and this is the time where Nepal can get benefit. We don't have employment in the country, so whatever goes out, when they come back, they should come with some experience and be good to the country. This is the purpose of the whole thing. Migration governance has to be institutionalized in such a way that whatever the GCM says, from 1 to 23 objectives, we follow one by one. Some of that has to be followed by the government. Some of the objective has to be followed by the workers, employers, and the civil society and the local government. So once you divide all the work into the 4 or 5 sectors and create a migration implementation, GCM implementation process, you are doing something good, and that also attracts SDG. Some of the point 0.8 decent work is attracted by the SDG too. So you come along whatever you can. So this is what we are trying to do in Nepal, and it is under process. Thank you.
Thank you for referring to both the SDGs, and I hope the practice that is being initiated in Nepal continues. Just to say, in reference to that, Ellen has in the question answer kind of box, she has mentioned what I was talking about. In the Philippines, they have a consultative council for OFWs, which is Overseas Filipino Workers, tripartite plus, but they've not been able to convene recently, but they also have a space. Migrant workers also have a space and are represented in the National Tripartite Industrial Peace Council. And I know Ellen, who is in this room at the moment, is one of those representatives in the Peace Council. Amit, this is what I'm saying about creating a process within South Asia where different stakeholders come together. This might be worth looking at as a mechanism to kick off kind of thing within the South. And of course, it will start off contentiously, but hopefully over time and over practice, we'll be able to, look at things from different perspectives and move things together. Let me come to Michelle with regard to a question that was put there. And Ellen talked about, she referred to something to direct hiring. And I know in the Philippines, there was a research recently done with regard to direct hiring. If recruitment is become, let me just say this is an assumption, this is not scientific. The assumption that we work on as recruitment has become a real challenge. And that is why ILO had to come up with fair recruitment guidelines. IOM has come up with ethical recruitment. This industry has grown exponentially, let us say from the 70s to now. It's an exponential growth of an industry. It's like the gig economy, which suddenly came on and everybody thinks it was always there, but it's new kind of thing. So what are your, as the ILO, should we be exploring, you think, other with information technology so available today, things like direct hiring, things like government to government agreements, oversight on labor migration and mobility, things like stronger bilateral agreements which have protocols for implementation, kind of thing, which you are currently working on in the GCM. Would those be options, or would that be the new kind of way to go? Michelle.
Thanks, William. I really enjoyed this discussion, by the way. There's quite a lot of different perspectives and insights, and very much appreciate the issues that have been raised. First, I want to say ILO does not see labor as a commodity, and we really have to bring a rights-based, human-centered approach back to how migrant workers are recruited. Sometimes I think we hear language that sounds like, this is about a conveyor belt of moving workers in and out of regions and so on, but these are human beings, and I think for ILO at least, and I think our constituents, we really need to use this moment to bring the conversation back to a human-centered approach and rights-based approach. And I think that really means using the moment to examine both the rule of law and how we structure recruitment, oversight, and implementation and monitoring at the national level, but also how we do that in destination countries. And I think it was pointed out, you simply cannot do this as a country alone. It really requires policies like minimum wages and labor market institutions in both the origin and destination countries. So what ILO has really begun to focus on, in addition to trying to help countries implement the standards and fair recruitment guidelines, is to help countries look at a set of minimum guidance, if you will, baseline for bilateral labor migration agreements. Now, I think you mentioned we are co-chairing in the UN Network on Migration with IOM, a working group to establish the first UN system-wide guidance on bilateral labor migration agreements. And we're going to be releasing those soon, and we're going to be pilot testing this. We hope countries will join us to utilize these, but it really does, it really would help to eliminate what I think has come out in this discussion, which is the varying degrees and gaps in the way recruitment is governed that allow for so much social dumping to occur, to allow for a race to the bottom in wages and working conditions and so on, when in fact this should be much more about solidarity and an even playing field for the workers as well as for business. Because I think it was really pointed out, business is undercut by nefarious recruiters or labor brokers who don't want to play by the rules, who want to not have to follow international labor standards, and who are not doing a service to migrant workers. And certainly this is what is leading to a lot of exploitation. So we need consistent standards implemented in both the origin countries and destination. And I think it was you, really, William, who mentioned, I mean, the Philippines and how they've structured discussions with other countries. And I recall some years ago, they implemented the Domestic Workers Convention. They said, we've ratified the Domestic Workers Convention. This calls on us to have a specific minimum wage that can't go below a certain amount. And this is what our negotiations need to embrace. Respect for the international standards that we believe are important for protection of all migrant workers. And that should be the basis of bilateral discussions. But I think there is quite a lot of room for us as we seek to build back and recover, for countries to really begin dialogue on these issues in an earnest way. There's also scope for business to business, federation to federation of employers across migration corridors between South Asia and the GCC countries. And there's opportunity for trade union agreements with committees that exist. I think you pointed out that Qatar just adopted a minimum wage. ILO is very supportive of labor market institutions in terms of how you create these more balanced and fair processes. We hope to see other countries adopting that. Certainly, we will remain a committed partner in this effort.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you everybody and the panelists particularly. Before I hand over to Shabri, I would like to thank the panelists for your insights, for your openness, and for sharing some of both the challenges and the ways forward. I'd like to end with two words that Michelle has actually said in this last segment, and that is solidarity, and that is for the trade unionists and for all of us in the rights-based movements. That is important. Solidarity across borders. Trade unions, a worker is a worker is a worker everywhere. And, and that is a strong notion of the importance that we have to keep in mind at all times. It doesn't matter whether you are a worker in India, working in Saudi, or in Qatar, or in Europe. You are a worker, and for that matter, ILO standards apply. Simple, hard truth, face it. That is important. The other word for the business people in the room, for the recruiters, and those who are a little more, have a different perspective, labor is not a commodity. And that is why it's important for us to recognize there are standards that need to be applied. An Indian worker or a Sri Lankan worker, a Nepali worker being exploited in the country of destination should hurt us all. His dignity or her dignity has an impact on all of us in country of origin. And that's why that notion of worker is not a commodity, labor is not a commodity, these are the strengths that bind us. These are the strengths that keep our communities whole, our families whole. And let us move from this webinar with those insights about solidarity and labor is not a commodity, as we talk about building a new reformed program or a new way of looking at recruitment and labor migration models. Thank you so much for those who put questions, for those who listened. I hope it was as meaningful for you as it was for me, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'll now hand over to Shabri to conclude. Shabri?
Thank you very much, William, and what an absolute pleasure. You know, I love the final takeaway messages that you have given, William. Solidarity and partnerships. Labor is not a commodity, like what Michelle said, and certainly along those lines, dignity of labor. You know, really very grateful to all the panelists, specifically to Mr. Amit Shriyansh, Undersecretary, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, for participating, for making an official statement on behalf of the Government of India, Mr. Lakshman Basnet from the South Asian Regional Trade Union Council, Mr. Prasad De Silva from the Employers Federation of Ceylon, Amit Saxena from Amway International, and of course my boss, Michelle Layton from ILO headquarters in Geneva. An absolute pleasure. You know, I think there are so many takeaway messages here for all of us, and it's very helpful that you are all here. And William, this would not have been possible if not for your unique style of moderation, which is truly what makes such conversations so very successful, and if I may say, action-oriented myself. Big thanks to Working Group on Business and Human Rights, and of course, UNDP colleagues, my own ILO colleagues. I know that Kelvin, our Deputy Director, Satoshi Sasaki, our Director, Dagmar Walter, who opened the forum this morning, UNDP colleagues, Harpreet and team, Adarsh for his technical support, and of course, Kavya and others from that team for logistics and everything else. Big thanks. We look forward to more such conversations, but let's make sure that we take them forward. So with that, namaste and thank you very much.